Now, as power cuts are continuing, the economy has been taking a huge strain. Eskom's continuous blackouts have not only disrupted daily life, but have also caused substantial drop in economic activity. Insurance consultancy firm Risconet Africa is now advising businesses of the need to look beyond generators for power solutions. Let's discuss this further now with Risconet's Volker von Widden. Volker, good afternoon. Welcome to today. So what is this possible solution for businesses you are suggesting, because you believe that diesel generators are not a sustainable load-shedding solution?
Good afternoon, Dan, and to your viewers. I think the point was that if we look at how corporates are responding to their own needs, they will be purchasing or arranging diesel power on a one-by-one basis. And if one looks at the capacity of those generators and the cost and the viability of those, that is what becomes difficult in terms of sustainability. So a larger and more efficient model that maybe takes account of other kinds of power generation or power sharing is very much more relevant now. For example, when one draws power out of a diesel engine, one doesn't draw it consistently. So the diesel power is used, there's a lot of heat loss, a lot of exhaust gas waste and so forth. And if you look at the total cost per kilowatt hour of generating power, at its most efficient, it could be somewhere between 10 and 20 Rand per kilowatt hour, and that's only when the maximum generation is happening. But when it's in idle, it's wasting all of that fuel. Now, if you imagine that there's a diesel generator of 10, 100 times that size, where multiple offtakes are running and keeping it running at an official level of drawdown of, say, 80%, you will keep your cost of power generation balanced, and you could even divert some of that power generation into storage. Now, that can be combined with solar, with wind, and many other things to make the overall substitution of power much more viable and sustainable in the long term. Secondly, one compares that to what is the business losing in terms of the profit that it is not generating because it can't run for the full month. And if you look at the variable costs of the business and the variable profit it might generate, then you compare that to a broader and shared alternative power generation model, and that's when the sustainability of that kind of model comes into play.
Just share a little bit more about what does a shared power generation model look like?
Well, if you looked at, let's say there's 10 hectares of factories in a particular area, any one of those factories may want to run significant alternative power, but may feel that it's not viable to do so. So if they all know that they're being fed through the same major transformer, call it on Jones Street in Isando, wherever it may be, and they wanted that particular transformer to run at full capacity, and they collaborated and put in a very high capacity generator that fed that transformer, and they shared the cost and the output of that transformer, then they would be able to regulate their own level of load shedding as those 10 factories in that unique area in that particular environment. They would know when power sharing would come on and load shedding would come on, activate their significant alternative power and share the cost and the load amongst them, and that would be a much more efficient model. And why we say this is that alternatives of a structural nature need to be considered as a part of risk management. And that's really what we're trying to illustrate, instead of just waiting and hoping that load shedding levels go down.
Yeah, because the solution would mean that you must take into account your production activity, for example, to make sure that you limit any downtime, which the longer you are not in operation, you might also lose some of your input material or raw materials, for example, because you have no power.
Yeah. There's a lot of waste in that. So imagine that you have an 8-hour production run, but there's load shedding after 6 hours. That means you must stop feeding your factory, your plant, so that you can run off that material and not have it stuck in the plant or half formed or otherwise. And so short production runs are extremely inefficient for the major factories around us. Now, of course, there's a challenge in how do they find this available power? How do they collaborate with their neighbors? Who are the high power users? And which of those users need long production runs in order to work and will buy and sell power to each other, as I say, off a communal power network, right localized within a major industrial suburb. And I think those kind of solutions, together with many other good solutions that are being proposed, are part of the solution. Another
Yeah.
factor is just the efficiency of it, because you have control over local power. Whereas at the moment, massive amounts of money are going into a national network, and the efficiency of that output has its questions, as we know from the evidence.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying, Volker, is that if you're in business and, like, for example, you're in manufacturing as one sector that we can talk about now, you really don't have a choice. You have to invest in renewable options to make sure that you're going to support whatever objectives you have in terms of your business.
Yes, so you do have the choice. So, but if we and businesses are allowed to generate their own power, so what we're suggesting is they're generated on a club basis in a suburb, in a closely formed collaboration, you'd find that there are significant efficiencies, and the offtake balancing in that environment could be useful, and that area is regulated by one level of load shedding. So you can actually plan for that. And at the end of the day, that becomes a strategic alternative. And bear in mind, you're increasing the profits of the business, and you're saving money on electricity that you would have paid for anyway. So it does become a net positive value add to that group of businesses.
Yeah, so you need to stop your reliance on Eskom, basically.
At least in full, yes. It's a partial alternative.
Yeah. Well, it's tough times indeed for business. And alternative power supply is also expensive. I guess when you club together, then you also, as you said, manage that beyond the efficiency. Because power has become a major risk for us.
Yes. So I think what we're talking about is this is a short-term solution to a desperate need. So one would think about getting the largest diesel generators in, and maybe turbine generators and so forth. But it was very interesting to hear this morning and yesterday that we now have pebble bed nuclear back on the table. It's called containerized nuclear. That's also a lot more feasible, because you're dealing with small power plants that you can locate in the the major metros. And maybe a 2-year power ship deal is also not so bad, if it is for a constrained period that gets us over this period of transition from where we are with very, very fragmented reliability on our power stations. So the combination of planning medium to long term, lots more diesel, more gas power, more turbine power distributed across the country, all of those, if they're actually executed, will result in much lower load shedding in 2 to 3 years' time. But diesel engines can arrive from a year's time. These are real immediate solutions if we start now.